Big moves are coming in the US drone and eVTOL space. On June 6th, the White House issued a major executive order titled Unleashing American Drone Dominance. It's a strategic push for the US to gain ground in the low-altitude economy, or as it's commonly known in the US, in the advanced air mobility space. But I'm going to use the Chinese broader frame of reference, including every economic activity related to the bottom 1,000 meters, the so-called low-altitude airspace, not just drones and air taxis. I've restructured this executive order to make it look like a project roadmap sorted according to deadlines and deliverables. And the most obviously crowded checkpoint is Thursday, September 4th. That's when we'll see military assessments due, export regulations rewritten, affecting both military and civilian drone exports, changes in the Exim Bank policy to support such exports, and many other points. Meanwhile, on the same day, the FAA must release a call for proposals for eVTOL pilot zones, at least 5 of them. This smells a lot like a rubber stamp approval process for proposals that are already in the pipeline. We are talking Joby Aviation, Beta Technology, Archer Aviation probably, maybe Doroni Airspace, and who's number 5? These 5 zones also come with funding, deployment and regulatory support via the EIPP, the eVTOL Innovation Pilot Program, and regulatory changes in the pilot zones to make experimental flights possible. No surprise then, Joby and Archer stocks jumped over 10% when this executive order dropped. Oddly enough, non-US players like the Chinese EHang and the UK Vertical Aerospace saw their shares rise too, despite not being eligible for US government funding. Why? Probably it's just spillover hype and increased investor interest across the sector, but it raises a bigger question. When companies like EHang, valued at 1.2 billion, and Vertical Aerospace at around 500 million are gaining grounds, how can also Joby and Archer, already valued at 6 billion, closing in on 7 billion already, keep growing? Is that just a US hype, or are these valuations actually justified? Honestly, the gap feels irrational. Let me know what you think in the comments. And now let's talk unmanned aircraft systems integration in the general airspace. The executive order lays out an ambitious timeline. Within 30 days, there must be a regulation proposal and a first draft of flying beyond visual line of sight BVLOS safety metrics. That's an incredibly tight timeline. Most likely, consulting firms will just consolidate drafts that industry players have already written. Then there's the demand to start using AI to support regulatory analysis in just 120 days. That sounds exciting, but again, 120 days for flight safety, that is very ambitious. And then the final BVLOS regulation must be ready in just 210 days after the first proposal. That means national airspace stakeholders like airports, airlines, cities, states, and safety boards will all need to give internally aligned feedback within that short time, and that is very difficult. In China, this would be tested regionally first for 3 to 5 years, with different pilot zones having different legislation, but the US is gambling big on a national fast track instead. So is this executive order a gift for US eVTOL startups, or is it actually a ticking time bomb? Sure, if things go right, the eVTOLs could be flying within 2 to 3 years. That would be awesome. But the downside, that's also the time frame when the promises and real-world business models get tested. Skeptics argue if you can afford an air taxi, you already own a helicopter, and for mass transit, the passenger capacity just won't scale. High-flying valuations mean big expectations, but soon financial performance will speak louder than marketing decks. Customers will ultimately decide if these eVTOL startups will fly, and within a few years, we will know more. Well, if they pull it off, the US could leapfrog back into a global leadership position in manned electric flight. China, the NERC recently released guidelines of cargo before people and countryside before dense cities. So China does take its time. And the EU, I'm afraid we can just skip the EU for this round. One final thought. Drone dominance in the title of this executive order sounds bold, maybe too bold. The US currently does not dominate the drone sector. I'm not sure what's there to be unleashed. China dominates by a long shot. And in military applications of drones, Ukraine and Russia both are more active, and they often use Chinese-made drones as input material for their armed FPV drones. And labeling international aviation standards as onerous, not exactly the kind of language that wins over allies or regulators. Is this executive order the turning point for the US low-altitude leadership, or is it just a well-branded PR stunt to please Wall Street? Let me know in the comments what you think, and please like and share.